don't want Bill.
Okay.
Do you want them to listen or go to sleep?
No, you know, my son said, you should get the real thing, Mom. You know, and then they listened more carefully.
Donna,
I
come
said,
in.
I don't know, I think I put him to sleep.
Come in this way.
Come this way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right.
Too far.
Just don't stand in the light, you're Ryan.
There.
There. How's that?
Cute.
Okay. I did this kind of in conjunction with some of the other people who are the Faulkner group, and there are a couple of other people that I didn't know were going to be here for sure, so I didn't mention them, but certainly this is for them too. And we have a few people, and we're getting more and more who were from the Mary Catherine Faulkner line and the Thomas Faulkner line. So I notice if you look at the tree, you'll see that it kind of just ends. There's nothing, they didn't know much about Mary Catherine at the time. So, okay, Beth, you can turn. We're going to swing back through the past generations and kick forward into the future, hopefully. I don't know about you, but I had a grandmother who was pretty feisty, and I could see her in some of the things that she did that maybe she wanted to go to the future. She was not one to live in the past, but she did tell me a lot of stories about people from her past, and it is through my mother's line that I'm on the Mary Catherine Faulkner. Okay, so I thought we would just use the swing as a little thing. And this is going to just add a little bit more to what Carolyn said. Here's the church, the Emmanuel Church in Newcastle, Delaware. And actually, French Huguenots were founders in Newcastle, Delaware, and there were a number of French Huguenots living there. So it may have been that the Faries knew some of the people there. So somebody asked about that, whether or not they went there. There were 3 Lefevre brothers who actually were some of the first settlers along the Delaware there in the Newcastle area. They're not related that I know of, but it is from the Memorials of Huguenots. This is a reference to the immigration to the Pennsylvania area, but they talked about Delaware. Excuse me. Okay. And Mary Catherine Faree, I found this information that she did not receive the land directly because it couldn't be put in her name. It was more or less a dowry that she had, and that the deed conveyed 2 tracts of land. One was north of Isaac Lefevre and east of Philip Faree's land, and the other is believed to have been on the southeast corner. Now this is what I interpret. This is not something that I found on any map, but from what the description was. The only thing I could find were the written words in the description. So that may have been where the land was, I'm guessing. This is supposition, as Betsy would say. Okay. And I just wanted, as a teacher, I wanted to kind of give you a feel for what's going on at the same time in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County. And these in 1710 to 1729, and a little bit about that, these settler groups were coming in. First, and this is Sadsbury Meeting House. If any of you have the Quaker and Sadsbury records on some of the people who are in your line, that's the Sadsbury Meeting House. It's on the line in Chester County, near Gap. It's not very far. It's a really pretty place. Then there was the Hare group and the Hare Milan group, and this is we're calling it now in Lancaster County the Hare family group. It was not, there's some debate, I think, on some of the researchers about whether or not Hans Hare was ever related or in this. It was Christian Hare's house, and you'll see the stand there. It's kind of, some of the stories are kind of a composite of all the brothers, Christian and his 2 or 3 brothers. So there's kind of a change that's saying the Hare family house. So in 1715, there's the Huguenots, and this is a little bit later house, I'm not sure, Peter, I think. And then we have the Mennonites in 1717. So these groups were all coming into Lancaster County. Go ahead, next. There's more. The Ulster Scots-Irish, and then the Donegal Scots-Irish. And you can go visit the Donegal Presbyterian Church, which is over kind of close to Marietta in West Hempfield Township, which is close to where I live. And then we have the Topplehannock settlement, which is not in Lancaster County anymore, but it was part of Chester County and part of Lancaster County at that time until those other counties developed and broke off. So if you've heard of Conrad Weiser, who did a lot of the Indian negotiations, that was his house, Conrad Weiser, in the Topplehannock area. So these were all considered actually Chester County and then Lancaster County later. So then the Quakers and the Wright's Ferry Mansion, Susanna Wright, very, very important Quaker. And John Wright, her father, who named Lancaster. And then the Convertiser, you guys are going there, a lot of you tomorrow. This is the cloister. And the Lutherans and the Reforms came. And this is an old grouping of Lidditz. There are pictures of the houses in Lidditz in the Moravian settlement. So that was a very strong little settlement that there started there in that time. And then the Amish came a little bit later, actually, in the 1700s, but much later than these other early groups. So this just sets your tone of what was going on in all of the groups. It wasn't just the French Huguenots, but they were getting along with all the other people. So I'm living in Lancaster now, so I'm kind of interested in the history of all the groups that are going on. So I found some information on Thomas Faulkner on some of the land grants and some of the surveying. He was actually working as a surveyor. It's speculated that he was buying property and selling it and kind of in and out of that. So it's possible that he did a good bit of survey work for this Isaac Taylor. And the London Land Group was called, or maybe it's the Pennsylvania Land Group of London, I'm not sure exactly. I've seen it both ways. So he owned land near Harrisburg, which was north and east. That he owned land in Bucks County. He owned land along the Pequay Creek and in what was the London lands, which I think Ken Eshelman talked about. And he was supposedly working and wheeling and dealing, I think, a little bit, but eventually moved to Bucks County. Okay. Mary Catherine died in Lancaster or Bucks County. We don't know for sure, but sometime between 1740, we think, and 1745. I have been trying to find where she is buried. I have not had luck finding that. She is on that monument. Her name is there as a settler, but she is not buried in that cemetery. And we don't have a record of her being buried in the Carpenter Cemetery either. So it's possible that she was not buried in that area, that they had moved already and then she died, but I'm doubtful. I think she died and maybe was buried on part of the land around. So anyway, there's land sales records that Thomas Faulkner had a wife called Jean or Joan, we can't read the writing of it on the handwriting, in 1745. So we know this was a second wife of Thomas Faulkner. And we also know, and I learned this in doing some of the research, a man could buy property and it was in his name. But when he sold it, it had to have his wife's name on too, because she had to be notified. They weren't going to sell it out from under her. So when you see records that are there with somebody's, the man and the woman's name should be on that, at least in Pennsylvania. That's my understanding. And anyway, they moved to Bucks County somewhere and lived there for a while. Thomas Faulkner died in 1752. And this is from his will. Joan got the use of the sorrel mare, the little gray horse. And his children, Thomas or the children of Thomas, was that Mary Catherine was still, well, she had died earlier, but these were the children of Thomas and Mary. Jesse, Mary, Susanna, and Eve. Now, there were two other females. One of them was, their last name was Green, and one of them, the last name was McCoy. Now, we don't know whether they were mentioned in his will, but we don't know whether they were grandchildren or nieces or whatever. Carolyn.
I just wanted to clarify something. I talked to Eleanor Edmondson, and the name for McCoy was definitely James McCoy.
Okay. Well, we don't know what relationship they were.
That was supposedly grandchildren.
Yeah. It could be grandchildren or nieces. They said either, sometimes they use those names, those interchangeable on a will. Okay, Ben. So I don't want to go into too much of this, but this is kind of the trail of those 4 children that we know. So Jesse Faulkner, born 1718, supposedly. But this may have been that he might have been the 1715, actually. Married Martha Smith, and this is Manalapan, York County. It's kind of over toward Gettysburg a little bit. It's a little more west than York.
The side of the Susquehanna River.
Yeah. On the other side is the Susquehanna, you're right. And then he sold 150 acres to Samuel Lefevre back, that was part of the original land grant. So we know that he inherited some land that Thomas still had that was from the original land grant. Jesse inherited it and he sold it back to the family. Okay, so then eventually he moved to Frederick County, Virginia. The Quakers disowned his wife for drinking. Just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And then we had Mary Faulkner. And this is the line of Betsy. And Mary married Stephen Hurd and moved to Pittsylvania, Virginia. And Stephen Hurd was born in Galway, Ireland. And he actually settled some land and things there before he got married. And he went south. Okay, then Susanna Faulkner married Thomas Wilson. And actually they kind of stayed around. He was another Irishman and a Quaker. And he stayed around in York County in that area. And then Eve Faulkner, and that's my line, and Carolyn's line. And they like the name Thomas, I guess. Married Thomas Griffith, okay? And that, he was Welsh. The Griffith, if you know all of the history of Wales, that was some of the line there. He was the son of John Griffith and Amy Morgan. Amy Morgan, and this is where the butter rum comes in, or the rum. Amy Morgan was the sister of Captain Henry Morgan. And so Amy's uncle, or not Amy's uncle, I have the Amy's uncle, but it's actually Thomas's uncle. He was a pirate, and you see the Captain Morgan rum, his namesake. And they moved to Bedford County eventually, but they lived in Manalapan or York County area at this time as a family. Okay, you can.
Donna,
Yes.
I have a question. I thought that Amy Morgan was the daughter of James Morgan, and James and Henry were brothers.
Okay, you may be right. I might have had it right on here, and I'm just saying it wrong. Yeah. Okay. 1756 map of Providence of Pennsylvania. This is what Pennsylvania kind of looked like. This would be New Jersey. Here's Philadelphia. Here's New Jersey. Whoops. Disappeared. Thank you. New Jersey here. And then there were 3 counties in Pennsylvania at that time. And the Delaware River there, you can see. This is Delaware. These are Indian tribes. They were in this area, the Susquehannocks and all. So the Faulkner family moved. This is basically where Paradise would be. They moved to Bucks County, and then they moved to York County in that area. Okay? Go ahead. Susanna Faulkner, again, same kind of thing, marrying Thomas Wilson. And then Jessie Faulkner and Mary Faulkner. Okay, again, they're on the swing, or swinging back and forth. And Eve Faulkner married Thomas Griffith. And the Salisbury Monthly Records, which is the building I showed you there, the Quaker Records. Thomas Griffith was at a shooting match, shame, and he did quarrel and fight, so he was disowned, and they had to have a talk to him. I mean, they decided, and that's how they did it. They had, they desired to treat with him about his behavior, and then he had to go and say he was sorry and he wouldn't do that again, or maybe he did it again, and then they gave him so many chances, and then he was disowned if he didn't shape up. And then he was brought back to order. He was drinking and carousing, and he was just in and out of trouble all the time. And even, he was off the swing here. He was drinking to excess, and he eventually, when he was over in Mount Allen, he was disowned, and then he's buried over in. Maybe he recanted, I don't know, but he was buried. Yeah, he was buried in the cemetery at Old Mount Allen in York County. Okay. So his children, or some of his children, moved from what was, if you're local, you know where Ski Round Top is. That's kind of the area they were in. This is the mountain. You can see the thing, and they had land along here, and William Griffith, who is my line, he had a number of properties he was taking after his grandfather, maybe, who was doing land speculation, I don't know. But anyway, you can go ahead. They eventually moved to Bedford County. So from the west, from Lancaster County, they moved to York County, then they moved over toward a little bit farther toward York County, Mount Allen. Then they moved over, my family moved over toward Bedford County, and eventually across the mountain to Somerset County. And several of them moved south. We had Pennsylvania, and some moved to Virginia, and then eventually Georgia, and continued on through there. So this is Bedford County. I just wanted to give you a little bit of look. Go ahead. You can go a couple through this. Bedford County, some of the mountains that they would have had. They lived in Dunnings Creek was at the base of these mountains before you crossed, and then he'd have to cross mountains like this to get to Somerset County. Go ahead. And this is a little story about, it's in the Bible actually, the Griffith Bible, where he migrated from Bedford County to Somerset County, and it was in 1809. He went from Fishertown, and there is a Quaker Valley road that goes through Fishertown. So there were Quakers at this time. And the first night the wolves howled so much, he had to set fire to the bushes to survive. So my son said, he must have run out of bushes because he's only there for a short time. So he'd go hut, but But anyway, he went back. He was kind of surveying where he wanted to move. So he ended up coming back with his family and his brothers and their families. And a couple of his brothers anyway. And they owned lots of land around the area. They set up a very nice kind of almost a trading post type thing, because this was pretty wild and wilderness area in the early 1800s. And people would come to hunt and shoot from the big cities like Philadelphia and all. And they would stay with them. And people, they sold whiskey, they sold, had lots of things. They were Quakers, but they were also, pretty profit-oriented, I think. And my father would call the place we'd drive past on this windy road down from Jennerstown to Boswell, or down to Johnstown, and you'd go past this real bad curve, and he would say, "Oh, that's the Griffiths' place," and it was known for that all around. Okay, go ahead. And here's another picture of kind of wildness of it. So then the Stephen Hurd part I wanted to show you that. This is Betsy's line. They came to America from, well, he did, from Ireland, and they got married and went to Virginia. They eventually went to Georgia, Wilkes County, Georgia, and began building a stockade called Fort Hurd. Stephen became very sick and was taken back to Pennsylvania, where he died. His nephew was Colonel Stephen Hurd, and he eventually became governor of Georgia. So we have some politically inclined people in our background. Okay, so here's all of his, and well, actually Mary and his children. If you look, you'll see the names. Here's Jesse Faulkner Hurd. You know, the continuation of a lot of the names. Thomas, Mary, Anne. Okay, go ahead. And again, here's some Indian things. It's just a different map, but it's, shows you it was very wild at this time, and the Indian towns. So we have Thomas Faulkner and Mary Catherine Faree, and then Eve Faulkner and Thomas Griffith. But we have, okay, here's the children: Jesse, Mary, Susanna, and Eve. And Eve married a Griffith. That's my line here. But Carolyn's line comes off here after Eve Faulkner and Thomas Griffith had William Griffith, and he married Sarah Hammond. And then I don't have all the rest of them, but they go down, and that's Carolyn's line. And Betsy's line comes off here from Susanna Faulkner earlier. Okay, the next slide is mine. And this all goes through here. Then we have Jesse Griffith and Lydia Conley, Yehu Griffith and Margaret Scott, Lydia Griffith, which was my great-grandmother, Roxy Pearl Bell, and then Hazel Johnston and me. So Madam was my 7th great-grandmother, through the Bells, the Griffiths, the Faulkners, and all those special cousins along the way. So I would like to think that my grandmother was saying, go out there and do good things and have a great family and get together and be good to each other. So thank you. Questions? Yes.
Actually, I have some paperwork here that says Thomas Faulkner and John James Jones were listed in the 1729 as surveyors.
Yes.
For the London Land, not possibly, but definitely as surveyors.
I did see that recently after I did this, but I still want to check. I haven't checked that totally
Okay.
to see if that.
Do you know
right.
where the source is? I mean, do you know
I
the
have,
source?
yeah, I have that same thing. But thank you. That's
I'll be
good to
seeing,
know that
I'll be
you're
seeing
doing.
the source
Oh.
in 2 weeks for the Oberholzer family reunion on my
Oh,
husband's
good.
side. The guy who did all the research and
Great,
everything.
great,
If you have
great,
any
great.
questions, I can take them.
Is that the surveyors,
I think so,
something, surveyors?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Shield got
Okay, thank you.
deleted, closed or something.
Shield?
The, what am I trying to
Oh.
say?
Did it get closed?
Yeah, if I go to,
Just scroll down. Go down on the. Go down at the bottom there at the arrows. There's PowerPoint.
yeah, but I didn't see there's only these two.
You got closed. That's all right.
Yep, I want to leave those two open.
You should be able to just go to open and it should be on the list that was there.
Okay,
Wait.
He's not ready.